Hello and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Lori Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome my special guest for today, Dr. Phil Mollon. Phil is a psychoanalyst, clinical psychologist, and energy psychotherapist in the UK. He is the author of 14 books on various topics in psychotherapy, trauma, dissociation, shame, self-psychology, and energy psychology. And he is the developer of 2 methods of treatment, psychoanalytic energy psychology and blue diamond healing, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes. He has taught widely in Britain and has presented many times at the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology conferences. And he has a new book coming out called The Physics of the Mind. And Dr. Phil, our Dr. Phil, is a past president of ACEP, which is how I know you, Phil, and I'm so thrilled to see you today.
Oh, I'm so pleased to be here talking to you, Laurie.
Oh, thank you. I'd like everyone to know that I did meet you. Well, I met you around 12 or so years ago, but you met me less than that because I knew who you were through ACEP. I had the absolute pleasure of working with you on ACEP's board and like to call you one of my friends. And it's just been a delight in my life to know you. So thank you for sharing yourself with this audience.
Thank you, Laurie. It was indeed a pleasure to work together on the ACEP board and a very constructive partnership.
Yes. And is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience as we get started on this interview today?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well.
Okay. Well, for those who don't know, would you like to briefly describe what some of these concepts are, energy psychology and blue diamond and so on? I know that's a really broad ask, but just in a nutshell so that we can kind of orient people as we move along.
Okay, so, well, energy psychology is this family of approaches that are to do with exploring the interface of the mind and the body's subtle energy system, working with meridians and chakras and so forth, as they interface with the mind. And that's the crucial thing, working at that boundary, that interface. And there are lots of these methods and they all work extremely well. And ACEP, Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, represents that whole family. And when I started to learn these methods, which I came to actually via EMDR. Now, if I step back a bit, so I've been in clinical practice seeing clients, patients with mental health problems, often very severe mental health problems, for 50 years. It's not a long time. And I trained first in clinical psychology, then in psychotherapy at the Tavistock Clinic in London. And I thought, I had this illusion that I was rather well trained. So I was a young man in my 30s, thinking I had these excellent trainings behind me. And then I started working in a psychiatric setting within the British National Health Service. And I was asked to see quite a number of extremely disturbed and very traumatized patients. I'll call them patients because in that setting they really are patients. And I discovered, to my immense dismay, that talking therapy, psychoanalytic talking therapy, ordinary empathic consultations, very gentle people telling me about terrible things they'd experienced, this was not helpful to them.
Mm-hmm.
It was literally worse than useless, made them feel worse, made them actually worse, made their state of mind worse. So I thought that's a terrible dilemma. And it set me off on this long search for better ways of helping people, particularly traumatized people. So this was like the 1980s. And that led me first to EMDR, which I trained in and became very fluent in its use and found it very, very good. But from there, I began to hear about some of these acupoint tapping methods, initially EFT, emotional freedom techniques, and they seem to be even better than EMDR and gentler. Mm-hmm. And so this opened up this wonderful new field. And then I started going to ACEP conferences and realized that it's a whole huge family of approaches. Learning thought field therapy was important to me. And what Roger Callahan, who developed TFT, used to emphasize was that there is information patterned into the energy system in the form of sequences of meridians and perhaps chakras as well. And there's emphasis on information in the subtle energy system. And I think that's very, very important to keep in mind, that it's information. And I kept having this sense that these methods were extraordinarily effective, but perhaps there was even more, even further that we could go. That the meridians, the acupuncture meridians and the chakras down the energy centers down the center are just an initial bridge to higher realms, higher dimensions. And just intuitively, I kept feeling that. And that's what eventually led to what I call blue diamond healing. And then this book I just written, The Physics of the Mind, which is actually based in conventional physics, but it arrives at the same kind of perspective of multiple higher dimensions that we can access. And of course, William Tiller is a very important figure, physicist, or strictly speaking, a professor of material science at Stanford, who, as you know, died sadly a few years ago. Yeah. And his research demonstrated there are these higher realms that are responsive to our intention and our request. And that's an extraordinarily important research finding. And that's what's been informing my work for a number of years.
Wow. Thank you for that beautiful historical and personal account that incorporates so much of understanding of where you are. And what you didn't say, but what I'm assuming is that as you migrated into new fields, that you found higher success.
Yes. And it's not like any earlier stage of understanding was repudiated, just all incorporated into further higher realms. So all the knowledge at lower levels remains there. It's important. Like I find the content of what emerges in the work I do is highly psychoanalytic, to
Hmm.
do early development, the mind in conflict, traumas, and the internal models that the child builds up of the world, the, the brain's predictions of what the world is like. All of these things are as important as ever. It's just that I don't work in what would look like traditional psychoanalysis anymore, but the
Understood.
content remains the same.
Got it. So it's the thought process for you and the and what comes out of your mouth. And maybe
Uh,
what you're asking your patients and clients to do collaboratively with you is what's
so
different.
yes, yes. Um, and also the bringing the body into the conversation. So all of energy psychology really is built on, it's an offshoot of uh, George Goodhart, who's a chiropractor, his work exploring uh, energy testing muscles as indicators of what's going on in the body and in the mind. Now, he was concerned with the body, but others began to explore what muscle testing, energy testing can reveal about what's in the mind.
Hmm.
And as we know, lots of energy methods have uh, jettisoned the use of muscle testing. But for me, it's very important. It's bringing the body into the conversation, the deeper wisdom of the body. So what tends to happen in the sessions I do is that I'm sitting more or less opposite the client initially, and they're telling me of whatever is on their mind. And I'm just listening, being present, not particularly forming any conclusions or judgments, not rushing to understand anything. And then at a suitable point, I sit alongside them and we begin to do some muscle testing, exploring the state of the energy system and the priority issue, and what the person wants to achieve in the session, and whether there are internal objections to achieving that. And so it's talking, muscle testing, and then we might tap on acupoints, work with chakras, or go into the blue diamond healing field.
Hmm. And are you finding that quite stubborn states of being shift more easily, more gently, and that health remains in place longer?
Yes, absolutely. And the thing about these energy methods is that because they are so effective, when they're not effective, we know that something is stopping them, something is blocking the process.
Hmm.
And so we can try to explore what that is and identify the internal obstacle and then address that.
Yes. It's
So
like, yeah.
they're very efficient ways of working.
Yes. And I find in my work too, similar to yours, that what used to take many sessions or maybe
Mhm.
never comes
Yeah,
up. We just rapidly file through many, many issues within moments, within minutes.
yes,
It's quite shocking when you first learn about it and suspicious. I was
yes,
raised in conventional psychotherapy to be suspicious snake oil questions
yes,
about fraud and
yes,
who knows, deception or just like wishful thinking, like a
yes,
delusional state of goodness, you
yes,
know? And so I'm finding that that's not true at all. So I'm with you on that. And
yes.
so I'm wondering, what is this blue diamond you keep mentioning? Sounds very intriguing.
Um, well, yes, the Blue Diamond work evolved gradually over quite a number of years. Um, I used to find myself sometimes if I wanted to take a moment in a session to inquire within, or perhaps to make use of intention in William Tiller's sort of work, I would I'd want to give the client something to do whilst I was going inside myself, and I used to find myself asking them to focus on this point under the collarbones here, and then this is like the early 2000s or something like that. And I was also learning about a body of information, intuitively derived, or perhaps a gift from, it was presented as a gift from higher dimensional beings. And originally it was linked to something called Kathara healing, although that term is not in use now. And the materials, the published materials are no longer available. Actually, the company that published them, the Azurite Press, went out of business. They have been summarized brilliantly and very clearly by my friend Noel Tobin, and I can give the address of his website. But anyway, this body of material, which was not immediately user-friendly, it was not easy material, and it was quite difficult and challenging and very complex. So it wasn't designed to have popular appeal, but it intrigued me greatly, and it always muscle tested as true. So I kept on exploring it, and it made use of an idea of higher dimensional grids, 12-point grids that look a little bit like a Kabbalah, except they are symmetrical. They're 12 points. And the idea that there are grids within grids, or bigger and bigger grids, cosmic grids, and most minute quantum level grids, it's all made of grids. And the center point, as it fits onto the human body, was this point under the collarbones. And so this body of material seemed to be feeding into my work in ways that were not particularly consciously thought out. It's just, it was, and I didn't understand this material anyway. It's far too complex for me to make much conscious sense of, but I kept struggling with it anyway, and it was somehow informing me. So this point, and eventually the term blue diamond came to me, and that what I was doing was something called blue diamond healing. I don't know quite when that term arose for me, and I started calling it that, and I would start to I would ask the person to go into this, put fingers on this blue diamond point, and perhaps the other hand on the heart chakra underneath. And it seemed somehow to lift me and the client into a higher dimensional realm, where we could simply request or command or direct that certain benign processes take place, certain issues be resolved. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that as long as the target issue has been fairly thoroughly talked through and understood, and we've tapped through working with meridians and so forth. And that there are no remaining internal objections, or sometimes called psychological reversals. If there are none of those, then the intended healing process would take place, always. And also that it would be a very reliable source of guidance. One could put a request into this blue diamond field to be guided on a particular matter or to understand something, and it would always deliver what was asked, not necessarily immediately and not necessarily quite as one might expect, but it would always deliver.
Wow, very profound. It almost sounds magical.
It would look magical, and yet, of course, there's a definite process to it.
Right. Yes, agreed. Oh, and I have to let people know I've been using this method in my own version of it, because I don't fully grasp all that you have translated, because the concepts are, from my mind, intriguing and often befuddling and hard to necessarily fully translate to clients. But the techniques, I have enough of a grasp of the construct to be able to set my intention for it. And whatever is in the higher mind then has permission to work. And I have also found remarkable healing abilities from this bridge. And I might want to add, I know you want to say more, but I need to say this. One of the things that I find so precious beyond your brilliance and these incredible gifts you bring is your humility. And one of the things that you often say is, this is not a certification program. I'm not selling anything. And in fact, this is a living system. And it is for each person to discover their aspect of it, their entrance into it, and their use of it, which evolves over time. And so you aren't putting the Phil Mollon stamp on this or trying to lock it into something. And yeah, I mean, I need to say that because that is as equally as important to me as the concepts and the healing process.
Yes, thank you for saying that, Laurie. That's more or less exactly what I was just wanting to say. In fact,
sorry to take that away.
No, you've put it beautifully. Yes, I always say that it will teach each person how to use it that's in a way that is right for them.
Yeah.
So there aren't really any protocols. I can describe how I use it, but for each person, it becomes their own. It's their own blue diamond field, and it's always astonished and delighted me what people tell me of how they're working with it and what is coming to them. And sometimes I might even feel mildly envious. I hear some extraordinary new insight or experience they've described, and I think, oh, wow, I've never thought of that or had that experience. But yes, so it is important, I think, that you can't train in it in the sense of learning protocols or getting a certification and having supervision in it and all of that kind of thing. It's not a commercial venture. And I tend to feel quite strongly that if you try to make something like this into a commercial product, then you cut it off from source. It becomes something frozen rather than a continuing living entity.
Yes, and yet there are access points that you have written in your book for information so that at least there's some sort of a template rather than just place your fingers on your blue diamond point and your heart and set an intention. It's not quite that simple, but almost. And so you have given some tips for the follower who's interested that's in your book and on your website. So that'll all be in the program notes for those
Yes.
who are interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is it too soon to ask another question linking this to the physics of mind? Because I'm still seeing that through line of information. You talked about information packets from
Yes.
William Tiller, and
Yes.
then the EFT, TFT family of energy psychology, and then the information in what you've created what you've named as the Blue Diamond method. And now you're on to the physics of mind, and I can't help but think that there's a through line here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There is, yes. So the Blue Diamond book, and its full title is what is it? Blue Diamond Healing, Transpersonal and Transdimensional Explorations in Energy Psychotherapy. So we could say that was all a kind of very esoteric physics. So then this book I just finished writing, it went off to the publishers a week ago. Maybe they'll say it's rubbish and they won't want it, but all being well, assuming they do want it, it will be published sometime next year. The Physics of the Mind. And so this is all based on conventional physics, but there's a lot of extraordinary stuff, extraordinary ideas in relatively conventional physics, and they arrive at the same point, really, I'm particularly fond of a theoretical framework by two physicists put it together, Richard Amoroso and Elizabeth Rorschach. Now, Elizabeth Rorschach sadly died. She was old, died a year or two ago, as I discovered when I tried to contact her.
Oh.
Richard Amoroso, I think, is still alive. And they have this framework, the holographic anthropic multiverse. So it's taking the idea that our matter-based world is subtended within multiple other universes and higher universes, all connecting to what some of us would call source or God source, and what they would call the unified field.
And subtended, is that like subsumed?
Like Russian dolls.
Okay.
Structures.
Nested one in the other and the other.
Nested, yes, yeah. Yeah, so all these higher realms that we can potentially access. And it's the idea that the very fabric of our space-time universe is pixelated. Each tiny fragment of stuff, space, whatever we call it, contains a holographic coding. The 0 point field contains this holographic coding, and the unified field is continually pulsing energy and kind of higher dimensional light into our system. And that's what is creating all that we experience as our matter-based realm. And the other way we can think about it, drawing on that kind of principle is that the universe is a gigantic thought, and that our minds continually interact with the world we are in, which was a key insight of the original quantum physicists. That was the shocking thing that they discovered, that it is human consciousness that determines whether we get an interference pattern or not on the double slit experiments. And that it is only human consciousness that determines that. So if you set up an experiment where with the double slits sending single particles like electrons, and they go through whichever slit they go through, and then they'll either create a scattered pattern on the screen, or they'll create interference waves, patterns as if they are waves. And if we measure which slit the electron goes through, we get this scattered pattern of particles. If we don't know which slit they go through, we get the interference pattern. But the extraordinary thing is, if the measuring device is there, but the information it gives is then scrambled so that no human consciousness can know what it is, then you get the interference pattern.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't scramble the information, you get the particle pattern. So there's something fundamental about consciousness that is continually interacting with our world in ways that we scarcely comprehend. So everything is mind, really, and we are minds, and our minds are not confined to our skulls.
Right.
So we get lots and lots of information about the past, the present, the future, intuitively, information that we get not through our sense organs. And then, of course, it gets filtered through our brains and cognitive structures and language. And the result that is distilled may or may not be accurate, but we are getting all this information.
And we're sending it too.
Yeah, absolutely. We are receiving and transmitting organs.
Yes. And I would say that it's true that the brain is not the mind exclusively, and that we can be connected like you and I are at a distance. You're in the UK, I'm in the US, but here we are, and we're with a potential future audience, some of whom are not even born as today, you know? So we can connect that way, but we can also connect through our full body. And so the thought isn't just the brain and the mind, it's also the heart and the gut and all of that. So it's all of what we are. I remember reading in the 1980s, the works by Jane Roberts, the poet, writer, channeler, and her work with the consciousness of called Seth, S-E-T.
Yes.
And one of the main, I mean, that blew my mind. That was my intro into a structured focus. It actually was preparing me to meet you. But, you know, it finally gave me something to understand what I was experiencing on the planet, in my body and my consciousness. And, you know, thoughts create reality.
Yes.
And that we are magnetic beings that attract through whatever it is, whatever we're desiring or we're repelling, or we're in conflict with, or all of these things, including being neutral, to let things pass through with unobstructed. You know, all of that is and we're very, very powerful beings, and we're also singular. And when we work collectively, then that's when things can really multiply and take on huger force fields. And that's why it's so important to know what you are meditating on, not just when you sit in the lotus position, but when you turn on programming on media or
Mm,
talk with other people or have repetitive thoughts. You're basically creating these energy fields that are
yes,
become more stable the more people agree to a certain
yes,
moment. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but these are different ways of looking at the implications of some of these things you're talking about.
yes. That is absolutely correct, Laurie. And uh, yes, so we are individually and collectively selecting our reality from the range of quantum possibilities, and we could collectively choose and select different realities. Um, individually, we can only uh, do so much. We can only select realities that are available to us, but there are many constraints by the collective human energy field, um, which is, one might like to think of evolving.
Yes, and evolving.
Yes.
Because we are in a polar dual reality. And part of evolution is to devolve, and then to respond to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is something I'd just like to emphasize, because I think it is very, very important. And you touched on it really, what you were just saying, Laurie, that um, that whatever we focus on in our minds will tend to attract more of it. And we can think of the mind as being like an internal landscape, like external space-time. And um, Einstein realized that massive bodies uh, warp space-time, which was his model of gravity. So light traveling past a massive star will be diverted because uh, the fabric of space and time itself is bent.
Mhm.
So that's why massive objects attract more and more. And you get the same phenomenon, I think, in internal mind space, that thoughts that are similar, thoughts and emotions and memories that are similar, tend to cluster together, and they exert a gravitational pull, attracting more and more. And so the more that they are fed, like a black hole, it will be consuming more and more material, cosmic level. The same happens in the mind, and severe traumas, repeated traumas, can result in black holes in mind space, which are terrifying uh, holes within the mind that threaten to consume the whole consciousness. So very traumatized people are continually struggling to stay away from their traumatic memories. And of course, this because our minds extend collectively and have an effect in the world, this is also something that's going on in our life fields as well as in our minds. So whatever we focus on will tend to attract more of it. So in working with traumatized people, of course, the trauma needs to be addressed, but it's an important balance, because if there's too much focus on the trauma of the past, then the client and therapist just get mired further and further in just prisoners of the traumatic past. It has to be balanced against looking to a positive future.
Mhm. Without being Pollyannish,
Yes, absolutely.
dismissive, or delusional.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a tightrope walk
Yes.
on a razor's edge.
It's a, it's a, it's a careful balance. Yeah.
Yes. There is a thought that let's call them the black holes. Not all black holes are dark, let's call it that. Let's say that the force fields that magnetize to one another.
Mm,
There's this thought that thoughts and energy of the light, of love and
mm,
connection and intelligence and all of these core principles actually carry more influence. They're not equally weighted with
yeah.
those of darkness and such.
Yes. Yes. So we need to bring in more and more of light from the unified field or God source. The more we can bring in, the better, and the more we can get it to shine into the dark places, the better. Uh, but of course, people who've suffered a lot of trauma or have got into very cynical states of mind
Mm-hmm.
can be effectively cut off or actively cut off from these higher realms. Uh, and that can be very, very difficult. Um, uh,
And can even be seen as threatening.
yes, yes. Although I've consistently found through my 50 years of clinical work that uh, many clients that I work with for any length of time, they seem to, without any overt influence from me, there might be energetic influence, but nothing in terms of what I say,
Mm-hmm.
but they seem to become more spiritually minded or more interested in spiritual matters, higher dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
and and so forth. So uh, and I think it's inherent in energy psychology work. Whatever method you start with, it seems to function as a step on a ladder that inevitably leads further up these dimensional levels. So a lot of methods that, or a lot of practitioners that started out using tapping on acupoints and so on, physical tapping, they have evolved towards methods that rely much more on intention and carefully crafted sentences of intention,
Mm-hmm.
which seem to work very well, extraordinarily well.
Yes, and it can come in different forms. So it could be the form of God or angels that you are asking your higher self or source, or from a higher mind or the collective unconscious. So it almost doesn't matter
Mm.
what it's dressed as.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to equate these things because obviously people have their own respect for their worldviews. And each person may not see another person's worldview as equivalent to their own.
Hmm.
But I would say that they are in many ways equivalent doorways.
Hmm.
They're
Yes.
access points.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Many different pathways lead to the same place.
Yes. Yes. To the answers. For those who are listening and not watching, they're missing out on a little moment here where occasionally when you talk about light and your hands rise up from your lap, you are catching actual sunlight
Ah,
on your hands. And so you're looking quite illuminated yourself as you speak of these beautiful things. So
ah,
it's a wonderful thing.
that's a nice thought.
Yeah. So I know we've been all over the map with so many intriguing topics. And of course, people can delve in more and find out for themselves if they're interested. But is there something else that you wanted to share? Make sure that people know about these topics.
Let me just think for a moment. It seems to me that I've said this, but I'll say it again for emphasis, that it's really the asking that's important. Across the road from me, there's a church, and it has a little advertising board and advert for the church. And one they put out recently simply said, don't have a prayer, ? Help will do fine. So the point they're making is you can't think of a prayer. We can't articulate a prayer. We don't know how to pray. Just asking for help, a sincere ask for help seems to be what's required. So when we, I do find it helps going into the Blue Diamond, but just the process of asking, directing it to higher realms, asking for help with whatever it is that we are grappling with, the help comes, the guidance comes.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to know how to develop better healing methods or how to better help a particular client, we ask, the guidance will come. And often when I'm working with a client, I might feel quite stuck, puzzled, not sure what's going on, where to go. And I say, let's just both take a moment in the Blue Diamond, because my clients will be very familiar with the Blue Diamond. And we go inside and just ask, what do we need to know or understand at this point?
Mm-hmm.
And something relevant will come to one of us.
Yeah.
That will provide some important clue.
Yes. An endless supply of appropriate wisdom.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And in the evolution of this kind of work, I feel it's very important not to have the illusion that we've understood anything or arrived at any place.
Mm-hmm.
It's an ongoing process of inquiry. It's an ongoing journey. And as soon as we think in a delusional way that we've understood something, it kind of freezes it.
Yeah.
And it's no longer living. So whatever sense we make of something in that moment, it's alive and relevant to that moment. But if we go back to it later, it's become a bit stale, and we need to be open to what is new that's going to inform us in this moment.
Yes. You don't want to be holding something, it's like expecting the leaf that's fallen from the tree to still be alive.
Yes, yes. And related to that, and maybe this would be the final thing I want to emphasize, to avoid the illusion of understanding another person.
Mm.
And I like to think of other people in general and the clients I work with as the sacred unknown other.
Mm.
And with the point that if we are respectful and patient and listen respectfully, this sacred unknown other may reveal something to us. of what is authentic in them.
And to themselves.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Beautiful. Such deep respect. And so that's making me feel very good about the fact that I don't completely grasp all the concepts in your book.
Well, I don't grasp them either.
But you do a beautiful job of explaining them. Oh my goodness, so much here that's so rich. And I sort of selfishly feel like that this would be a good intro talk that we just did. Now that we've oriented people to kind of the landscape, that there could be a part 2 where we go deeper, because there is so much here about cross thresholds in consciousness, thresholds with people's paths in life. And there's a richness of when it comes live in the moment that is hard to understand when you're talking theoretically about stuff. So I would just say that if this is at all appealing to people, to play with it and see, maybe ask for a dream if you're not going to read the book, or, just maybe ask, as you said, if you don't have the prayer, just ask for guidance to learn more about how this can apply for yourself or others. Because reading the books and studying this, and there are you've done a beautiful job with YouTube videos, I'll have all of that. But that's only one path towards the information. The information is everywhere around us.
Yes.
And I think that all that we really need is willingness and consent to be more informed, and then it arrives.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you've arrived. Thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to add before we say goodbye for today?
I mentioned an excellent website by Noel Tobin that
Yes.
Summarizes a lot of the esoteric science that partly inspired Blue Diamond Healing. And his website is creation-principles.org. creation-principles.org.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, and I'll make sure that that goes in the program notes as well. Oh, thank you so much for all that you're bringing, Phil, and for your time today.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, from my heart to yours.
Namaste.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.